big story on Gravitas tonight. They've shaken hands against all odds. Official delegations from North and South Korea met in the demilitarized border town of Panmunjom for the first time in almost 2 years. And here's what they've agreed upon. North Korea will send a high-ranking delegation and athletes to the Olympics in South Korea's Pyeongchang in February. It will also send fan club supporters or cheerleading squads for individual competitions, an artists' troupe, members of the media, and even a taekwondo show team to these games. According to some media reports in South Korea, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's younger sister, may also be sent to attend the games. The meeting came after months of escalation and rising tensions on the Korean peninsula. Both sides issued press statements just before they began their conversation. The shrill tone that we've gotten used to was missing this time. Let's first take a look at what the leader of the North Korean delegation had to say.
그래서 우리 북남 당국이 진지한 입장, 성실한 자세로 이번 회담을 잘해서 이번 고위급 회담을 주시하면서 큰 기대를 걸고 있는 온 교회에게 새해 첫 선물, 또 값비싼 결과물을 드리는 게 어떠한가 하는 생각을 가지고 이 자리에 나왔습니다.
In a statement after the talks, both sides announced that they will now hold military talks to ease tensions on the border. It is important to note that while Pyongyang and Seoul may be the parties directly affected by this conflict, they aren't the only ones that make up this whole equation. Japan, China, and most importantly the US are significant stakeholders. How do they see today's talks? Let's start with Japan. It's the immediate neighbor of North Korea. Some of the missiles test fired by Pyongyang flew over the Japanese province of Hokkaido recently. Understandably, Tokyo is keeping a close eye on today's developments. And after the talks, Japan's chief cabinet secretary Yoshihide Suga said that they appreciate North Korea's show of willingness to take part in the Olympics. They see today's development as a positive step. But Tokyo remains wary of the missile threat from Pyongyang. The Japanese government still maintained that the missile program remains a grave and imminent threat to peace and security in the region. The next is China. It welcomed the talks between North and South Korea. The Chinese continue to call on the global community to engage with North Korea to diffuse the tension here. And here's what the Foreign Office in Beijing said after the talks.
朝鲜北南双方今天上午举行的高级别会谈确实世界上很多国家都非常关注。那么作为半岛的近邻，对半岛和本地区的和平、安全与稳定有着高度关注的中国，当然我们也十分关注。我们看到了有关报道，我们对朝韩高级别会谈能够举行感到高兴。
So is everyone welcoming the talks? No. The United States does not agree with China's approach. Washington has been unrelenting. It sees no point whatsoever in engaging with North Korea. Donald Trump's bombast precipitated the crisis last year. The United States moved the United Nations Security Council several times over the year to push for harsher sanctions. The question now is, why is America averse to the possibility of peace? Some say it's simply an ego battle for the man occupying the White House currently. The war of words between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un has ruled headlines over the past few months. Kim continued missile tests despite threats and sanctions. Trump had egg on his face. He refuses to course correct though. And that, we are told, has left his team deeply divided. Here's what's going on inside the White House Situation Room. Tonight, we're telling you where the world's most powerful men stand on North Korea. We're sharing with you the inside track, as it were. Going by several accounts and what we understand from our sources, the US president is playing with fire with a bottle of kerosene in his hand. And here's why. A high-risk strategy of a small war with North Korea is being seriously considered by the top brass of the Trump administration. But two reports say that the White House stands divided over this plan. US President Donald Trump and his National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster are in favor of the war plan, which many call the bloody nose strategy. Defense Secretary James Mattis and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson strongly oppose this strategy. And here's the catch. We all know that Trump has not been getting along with Rex Tillerson. There is strong speculation that Tillerson could be replaced by Mike Pompeo, the CIA chief. If this switch goes through, the US president will have his way. The idea of war will be the idea supported by the majority The question then is, why is war the only option that the American president likes? Consider this. Last year, Donald Trump opened doors for South Korea and Japan to buy more sophisticated weapons and military equipment to boost the power of their defense forces against North Korea. This is an open secret. Defense companies are known to back the Republicans with funds for their campaigns. US President Donald Trump is known for his backing to the defense manufacturers in America. The next piece of fact should make this amply clear. Just the mere threat of war in October last year gave defense talks in the United States a 30% boost. So it all makes sense for a businessman turned politician turned president to keep this pot boiling. There's money to be made if there's a war in the Korean Peninsula. So as we look at what the future holds, it's worth looking back too. Why are the two Koreas at loggerheads? Where did this conflict originate? Why hasn't it been resolved? Our next report explains the 60-year conflict in less than 2 minutes.
In the wake of World War II, as the Cold War began, the Korean peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel. The North received Soviet backing, while the United States supported the South. In 1948, the two sides became officially known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea in the North and the Republic of Korea in the South. The Korean War broke out on June 25, 1950, when the North's army invaded the South. Capturing Seoul within days, North Korean forces advanced to the tip of the peninsula. A UN coalition led by American troops stepped in to force the North Koreans back, pushing them as far as the Sino-Korean border. Chinese forces crossed into the north to help launch a counter-offensive. UN troops retaliated, and eventually in May 1951 the border between the two countries was fixed around the 38th parallel. In July 1953, North Korea signed a ceasefire agreement with the US, marking the end of the fighting. An estimated 2 to 4 million people died or disappeared during the conflict. No formal peace treaty has since been signed, leaving North and South Korea still technically at war.
Hollywood's top stars wore trendy, expensive black and took a stand against sexual predators. It was a lineup of stars so bright that they dazzled the world. They were there to let us know that Hollywood is ready to discard the one item of furniture the world of showbiz loves, the casting couch.
Thank everyone who broke their silence this year and spoke up about abuse and harassment. You are so brave, and hopefully shows like this, more will be made. So people out there who are feeling silenced by harassment, discrimination, abuse, time is up. We see you, we hear you, and we will tell your stories.
What a speech. Over the past year, famous women, stars like Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek and others, have accused powerful male producers and co-stars like Harvey Weinstein and Dustin Hoffman of sexually predatory behavior towards them when the ladies were embarking on their careers.
Many of us were taught not to tattle. It was a culture of silencing, and that was normalized. I urge all of us to not only support survivors and bystanders who are brave enough to tell their truth, but to promote restorative justice. May we also please protect and employ them. May we teach our children that speaking out without the fear of retribution is our culture's new North Star.
It's not just the women. Some men have claimed to be victims too, like one young man who accused actor Kevin Spacey of making sexual advances towards him. Be it men or women, all victims say that they did not speak up at the time because the predator was powerful and acted threatening, and yet the event last night has come under fire in the global media for several reasons and has prompted WION to ask this question. Is a sexual encounter between a powerful person and a victim working under him always a one-way street? We absolutely condemn inappropriate behavior, and if the victim is a minor, the strictest punishment must be awarded to the predator. We stand by that. But why is the Globe ceremony being slammed as the ultimate exercise in hypocrisy? Consider these questions. Most stars who spoke up against Weinstein or Hoffman were young when the men are said to have made their moves. But now they're all stars at the peak of their careers. So why did they not speak up over the 20-odd years they were climbing this ladder to success? The answer is obvious. For the not-so-talented but thoroughly ambitious among them, there may have been no 20 years, no stardom, and so they gave in. At the Globes, the presenter cracked a joke about Woody Allen. the other influential director long accused of being a sexual predator in Hollywood. But Hollywood's crusaders did not laugh at that joke. They squirmed instead. After all, Allen is a director that all movie stars would give an arm and leg to work with. Then there's a question. Is it always men in power who exploit and make passes at women working under them? What about women? From Hollywood to Bollywood, from the IT industry to, yes, even the world of journalism or politics, take a look at around us. Many women and men think nothing of using their physical charms or flirtatious ways to get ahead in their career. There's a grey zone, though, and a very thin dividing line between mutuality and coercion. So is kissing for help to climb a ladder and complaining about the helper 20 years later entirely ethical? We're leaving you with this food for thought. And here's another question that we have for you. Have you ever heard of the term grey rape? No? Senior editor Padma Rao explains.
It's at least as old as Adam and Eve, and yet we humans are nowhere near understanding human sexuality. It's as common as the common cold and remains the most favoured item of furniture in film studios, boardrooms, even newsrooms. I speak of the infamous casting couch. Laws against sexual harassment at the workplace abound in advanced Western countries. India too is not far behind, with a sharply amended anti-rape law that was passed after the horrific tragedy of Nirbhaya's rape and murder. At the Globes, big stars like Daryl Hannah, Reese Witherspoon and Meryl Streep pumped their fists, brought activists along to the show and swore that they were going to change Hollywood. Lecherous men like disgraced producer Harvey Weinstein or director Woody Allen, actor Kevin Spacey would not be the norm in Hollywood anymore, but the exception. Hollywood was going to get rid of sexual exploitation by powerful men in the male-dominated industry, and these women were going to shake up the world of movies.
Standing up together, we're drawing a thick black line between yesterday and tomorrow. And the way things used to be done, the way business used to be conducted. It's not going to be that way anymore.
India too is seeing growing allegations, even court cases filed by Indian women. Some allege sexual misbehavior by their powerful male bosses and a denial of promotions if sexual favors are not granted. Others have claimed that lecherous editors made unwanted moves which would have led to intercourse had the victim not spoken up and cried rape. And in most cases, the courts have preferred to err on the side of caution and treat all allegations as rape. But what is rape? Let's take a look at what the Oxford Dictionary tells us. The crime typically committed by a man of forcing another person to have sexual intercourse with the offender against their will, unquote. That, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is rape. But who, other than the alleged victim and accused, can define in tangible words or present tangible evidence of what actually transpired between them during that fateful interaction, which usually takes place behind closed doors? That's the grey area. But thanks to Cosmopolitan magazine several years ago, it at least has a name. It's called grey rape. Now, what is grey rape? Grey rape is somewhere between consent and denial and is confusing because often both parties are unsure of who wanted what, unquote. That was the Cosmopolitan magazine in 2007. Police officers say that the term grey rape is not recognized by the criminal justice system in any country as such, but that police well know and acknowledge the grey area in any charge of rape unless it involves a minor. In the United States, there were several such cases of what could be termed grey rapes. Now let's take a look at some cases. Were they unaware or unwilling? In the United States, two students, Lack and Klein, had sex at Brown University in 1996. For Lack, it was consensual. But Klein was drunk and had no memory of the encounter. Blaming alcohol, she filed charges. Lack argued that she both gave consent and initiated the act. Though Lack received academic punishment, the charges against him were finally dropped. In 2014, another university expelled a student it called John for allegedly raping Jane, whom he had met at a party. They had consensual sex, but she was later angry at seeing him with another woman and alleged rape. Doe was expelled, but he sued the university and later won his case. It is one of the oldest tricks in the world and has propelled many to the tops of their careers, be it in whichever field. Many men and women use body language, gestures, and ultimately sexuality to further their careers, seek favors, get out-of-turn raises, climb the steep ladder to success. But many can and do change from willing partner to forced victim when there is a fallout, a disagreement, or perhaps another woman or man in the picture. Sexuality is human nature, but like nature, it can often be a puzzling slate grey. Padma Rao, WION.
Here's another headline that came out of the awards ceremony. Oprah Winfrey for President of the United States. Seriously, the speculation was apparently triggered by Winfrey's address at the Golden Globes, chiefly her final lines.
So I want all the girls watching here and now to know that a new day is on the horizon. And when that new day finally dawns, it will be because of a lot of magnificent women, many of whom are right here in this room tonight, and some pretty phenomenal men fighting hard to make sure that they become the leaders who take us to the time when nobody ever has to say, "Me too," again. Thank you.
Then came the report filed by CNN, and I'm quoting, Oprah Winfrey is actively thinking about running for president. Two of her close friends told CNN Monday. The two friends, who requested anonymity in order to speak freely, talked in the wake of Winfrey's extraordinary speech at the Golden Globe Sunday night, which spurred chatter about a 2020 run. The point being made was that if Donald Trump, also a celebrity TV star with no experience of government, could become president of the US, why not Oprah Winfrey? The heartthrob of millions of Americans. The online Slate magazine, in a provocatively titled article, asked some common sense questions. It's safe to assume that Oprah will be in charge of the country in January 2021, if not sooner, but how will she govern? Who will be appointed to key roles in her administration? Might she, like Trump promised to do, overcome her lack of government experience and policy knowledge by selecting, quote-unquote, the best people to advise her? It then went on to list the dubious characters Ms. Winfrey has promoted on her television show. Dr. Oz, who advertised miracle pills and fat busters. Dr. Phil McGraw, who exploited drug addicts. Jenny McCarthy, who was against children being vaccinated against infectious diseases. Actress Suzanne Somers, who took 60 pills a day to fight aging. Donald Trump had a different take on it, though. He said, and I'm quoting again, people were worried about Obama coming to their homes and taking away their guns. Oprah will come to your homes and leave books there, which is far, far worse. This is a woman who, every chance she got, told people to join her book club. That's Donald Trump for you. For the record, though, America elected actor Ronald Reagan to the presidency. Terminator star Arnold Schwarzenegger was governor of California. Clearly, there's room for more. And frankly, if Donald Trump can win the presidency, why can't Oprah Winfrey? But does she have what it takes? We did a SWOT analysis for you, and this is what we found. Let's look at her strengths first. At 63, Oprah Winfrey is younger than some of the top Democrats who might run, including former Vice President Joe Biden and U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders. Just like Trump, Oprah's wealth could be an enormous asset. According to Forbes, her net worth is $2.8 billion. She has certainly built up a lot of goodwill among Democrats by backing Barack Obama in 2008 and Hillary Clinton in 2016. She also has contributed more than $95,000 to Democratic candidates and political parties. And of course, she's Oprah. Pretty much all of America knows her thanks to her decades of appearing on television and acting in movies. But what about the weaknesses? Everyone has them. There are others who have spent their careers fighting for the same things Oprah presumably would. And they can appeal to the same elements of the Democratic base to win public office. Even the most popular candidate needs to get their message to the voters, identify supporters, bring them to the polls. Experienced politicians know how to build such an organization. Oprah has none of that right now. Her business ties are extensive and include a cable channel and magazine. She's also a contributor to CBS News' 60 Minutes, and that could pose conflicts of interest if she decides to run. But the opportunity is immense. When a reality television star and billionaire real estate developer with no previous political or military experience can be elected president, why not Oprah Winfrey? Donald Trump's approval ratings have fallen to 37% since the release of Fire and Fury, that controversial book on the Trump administration. And there's a threat too. Would the Oprah aura be able to protect her from the slings and arrows of a modern political campaign? A day after her Golden Globe speech, pictures have emerged of her with disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. So while she may have spent most of her life on a television screen, presidential candidates face a vetting far more invasive than anything she has ever endured. Let's look at Mr. Trump. He does very little, admittedly, to earn our sympathy. Currently, he's in the news for his daily work schedule. An American president's job will not be envied by many, but you might change your mind if you look at what Trump covers in one work day. Take a look.
Being the president of the most powerful country in the world is certainly not a 9-to-5 job. But US President Donald Trump is taking it to the other extreme. According to a report by Axios, Trump's working schedule is shrinking by the day. His official day doesn't start before 11 a.m. He's holding far fewer meetings and is demanding more executive time, which is a fancy way of saying me time with lots of TV, Twitter and time alone in the residence. Trump's schedule, according to Axios, differs from schedules the White House sends to the media every day. According to the report, the president has designated executive time from 8 to 11 a.m. in the Oval Office, but actually spends these hours in his residence watching television, making phone calls and tweeting. At around 11 a.m., the president emerges for his first meeting of the day, which is typically an intelligence briefing. During the day, he has a couple of meetings with several breaks of executive time interspersed. The unscheduled executive time is spent in the dining room next to the Oval Office, where the president watches cable news. He returns to the residence at about 6 p.m. In case you were confused by the president's schedule, Axios has tried to put it into context. On Tuesday, for instance, Trump had his first meeting of the day with Chief of Staff John Kelly at 11 a.m. He then had executive time for an hour, followed by an hour-long lunch. Then it was another 1 hour 15 minutes of executive time, followed by a 45-minute meeting with National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. Then another 15 minutes of executive time before Trump took his last meeting of the day at 3:45 in the afternoon. He then ended his official day at 4:15 p.m. According to the report, the president's schedule has changed over his 1 year in office. At the beginning of his tenure, he would hold breakfast meetings, but he has since pushed back the start of his day. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders responded to the Axios report with a statement defending the president's work ethic, saying, and I quote, "The time in the morning is a mix of residence time and Oval Office time, but he always has calls with staff, Hill members, cabinet members and foreign leaders during this time. The president is one of the hardest workers I've ever seen and puts in long hours and long days nearly every day of the week all year long. It has been noted by reporters many times that they wish he would slow down because they sometimes have trouble keeping up with him." Unquote. To be fair to Trump, other American presidents in the past were known to have erratic schedules. Barack Obama began his day around 9 or 10 in the morning and always made it back to the residence to have dinner with his family. In contrast, George W. Bush tended to get to the Oval Office by 6:45 in the morning. Bill Clinton was known to make calls in the middle of the night. Ronald Reagan worked shorter days towards the end of his presidency. But unlike these past presidents, Trump is facing questions about his mental health and his capacity to remain in office following a bombshell book on his administration. This latest report only causes more damage to his carefully crafted image. Bureau Report, WION.
Now let's talk about money. Not the kind that you and I have, but the cash reserves of entire countries. It turns out that China has begun the new year filthy rich. It has over $3 trillion in cash reserves with the People's Bank of China. That's according to a report in the Forbes magazine. $3.139 trillion to be exact. What does that mean? In simple terms, it means that China produces and sells more than it buys. It has a trade surplus built over decades. China alone accounts for 14% of all global trade. And that explains the staggering amounts of money in the accounts of the People's Bank of China. It means that China is sitting on more cash than Russia, Brazil and Mexico put together. Last August, China added more money to its bank savings account than what Venezuela had in its central bank. China then proceeded to double that money the very next month. It could have bought Venezuela if it wanted and still have enough money in its vaults to prop up its own currency. It explains the confidence investors have in China. The more money an emerging country has in its central bank foreign currency account, the more confidence banks will have in lending to that government. They believe their interest payments will be covered by cash reserves, which is correct assessment. But cash reserves alone are no indication of how wealthy China is or its citizens are. Much of the economy in China is state-controlled and the government has used its cash reserves to drive the GDP. It means that China has used this money to build world-class infrastructure even in places where there is little or no economic activity to justify it. In the process, China's debt load has grown over the last decade, leading to investor concerns as well. But China still remains the world's second largest economy after the US. It continues to enjoy a trade surplus, although for how long is not clear. If you were to visit China, what would you see? Any first-time visitor to that country cannot but be impressed by the world-class infrastructure evident in cities like Beijing and Shanghai. For that matter, even Tier 2 cities in the southeast boast well-planned roads, commercial and residential districts. China's 2 decades of economic growth has brought the good life to millions of its citizens. Per capita income is over $15,000. Literacy rates topping 96%. Health and sanitation has progressed by leaps and bounds, but the challenges are also growing. The government has a struggle on its hands to ensure job creation and keep living standards high. Nearly 8 million graduates entered the job market only last year. They have high expectations but dim prospects of getting well-paying jobs. Primarily, the fault here lies with the education system, which does not prepare students for employment. Vocational schools have not measured up to the demands of the marketplace in China, and this is happening at a time when millions of workers in traditional industries like iron and steel and coal are being laid off. New jobs are poorly paid and offer no security or benefits. The minimum wage has been rising steadily over the last decade, but substantial regional differences remain. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening in that country. China's economy is moving away from mass production of low-tech goods and products like toothbrushes, cheap electronics, toys and so on to higher value, higher technology products. And this is where the US and Europe currently dominate, and the entry of China into this segment means more competition, better quality, even lower prices, but it's not clear which country or whose people will benefit. Now, a little over 2 months ago, the National Endowment for Democracy, a US think tank, warned in a report of the pressure being put on independent media outlets by Beijing. The report underscored that outlets that carried any negative coverage of China were punished in various ways. Why are we talking about this? Because we want to tell you where China is spending this money. This report said, and I'm quoting, indirect pressure is applied via proxies, including advertisers, satellite firms and foreign governments who take action to prevent or punish the publication of content critical of Beijing. These measures obstruct news gathering, prevent the publication of undesirable content and punish overseas media outlets that fail to heed restrictions. This report documents a series of efforts by Chinese diplomats to stop coverage of critical stories critical of Beijing in France, in Indonesia, in New Zealand and Germany. It linked the spending of advertising revenue by Chinese companies and access to the Chinese market with the publication's adherence to the Communist Party line. In 2016, the websites of the International Herald Tribune and Bloomberg were blocked after they reported extensively on the family fortunes of former Premier Wen Jiabao and current President Xi Jinping. The New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, according to a report in the South China Morning Post, alleged attempts to hack into their networks and trace these attempts to China. The Freedom House, a Washington-based think tank, in a study rated media freedom in Hong Kong at 35 points on a scale of 100. It said the Hong Kong media is only partly free. In fact, for many Chinese language media outlets outside that country, taking advertorials and free news content from China-controlled state media is fairly routine. It enables Beijing's mandarins to control and shape narrative about China overseas. That's where all the money is going.